Hello everyone, nice to see you. Nice to be together in the temple, you know. We are hurtling, I guess, or plodding into the solstice, nearly there. And it's the time of year in the north where it's very dark. Well, some people are probably on from, some people are on from the other hemisphere. And it's the long days then for them. But for us in the north, it's dark. And I think while we tend to go to meditation to open out things, or I certainly did, to open out into the light, one of the big discoveries was that the dark itself is fertile and has its own wisdom and intelligence and value. You make your way in daylight. You make things out in daylight. But what if there's no moon, no stars, no light? If it's somewhere you've been, then it might be possible. But what if you've never been there? How will you get hold of something? Great old Chinese koan, Yunmen. What if you've never been there? How will you get hold of something? So everything strange in our lives, everything puzzling, everything in the world of the unknown is in the world of the dark. And I think it's all right to relax into that, to rest into that. So this, just for today, we're going to rest into that. Just sitting here, feeling the peace descending. Part of that peace is not knowing things, not having to know things, not having to stack up the things I know, you know. It's nice. I'll read you a couple of, this is Transtromer, who's a great, this is a Swedish poet who was introduced, at least to me, by Robert Bly, and a tremendous great poet, and he's a great translator of the more recent times, a woman called Patty Crane, who just moved to Sweden with her husband. He had a job, and she ran into Transtromer and ended up like learning Swedish and talking to him and translating him. So it's rather a great story. You know. Night travel. It is teeming under us. Trains depart. Hotel Astoria trembles. A glass of water by the bedside shines into the tunnels. He dreamed he was imprisoned on Svalbard, which is an island up in the Arctic Circle, which sometimes was used as a prison in different regimes over the centuries. He dreamed he was imprisoned on Svalbard. The planet rumbled as it turned. Glittering eyes passed over the ice. The miracle's beauty existed. The beauty belonging to the miracle existed. Night travel is teeming under us. Trains depart. Hotel Astoria trembles. A glass of water by the bedside shines into the tunnels. He dreamed he was imprisoned on Svalbard. The planet rumbled as it turned. Glittering eyes passed over the ice. The miracle's beauty existed. Yeah. Tracks, 2 a.m., moonlight. This is the same poet. Tracks, 2 a.m., moonlight. The train has stopped out in the middle of the plain. Far away, points of light in a town flickering coldly at the horizon. As when a man has gone into a dream so deep he'll never remember having been there when he comes back to his room. Something we've all done. As when a man has gone into a dream so deep he'll never remember having been there when he comes back to his room. As when someone has gone into an illness so deep, everything his days were becomes a few flickering points, a swarm, cold and tiny at the horizon. The train is standing quite still. 2 a.m., bright moonlight, few stars. I guess it's not what they usually put in the travel brochures. It'll be freezing cold and the train will break down in the middle of the plane. But it too has the beauty of the miracle. So I've been kind of interested in I guess I've always been interested in the thing you're not expecting, the thing. And it's also, in a way, the beauty that's inside difficult things or dark things. Turning towards the difficulty. And so at certain times I think, oh, this is an especially difficult time we're living in, which is probably true. But it's also all times are difficult and all times are full of beauty. Here's a poem I wrote long ago about the stripping away that happens. That in this poem I called it poverty. I think I was really poor at the time, but it's really the poverty of not, when you forget to hold on to all the things you know and feel and they're correct and all those things. Poverty seizes me in the middle of things, and my life will never be the same. I will face outwards to the trees and animals and not look back. Silent furred creatures and the tall eucalypts gather slowly about me. They have given me this new life, walking alone in the moonlight, not knowing who I am. And I wanted to read Jacques Lucien is somebody many of you have heard me talk about, and he was blinded by an accident when he was a child. He ran around a corner, ran into something. It hit his optical nerve in some way that just damaged it irretrievably. So he was blind from the time he was quite young, like 5 or something like that. But then he became a remarkable person, which he may well have become anyway. He said, I'm certain that children always know more than they are able to tell. And that makes the big difference between them and adults who, at best, know only a fraction of what they say. We're always babbling about things we don't know anything about. The reason is simply that children know everything with their whole being, while we know it only with our heads. And I began to look more, almost about to say, a hand laid on me and made me change my course when he was really messed up after his accident. And I began to look more closely, not at things, but at a world closer to myself, looking from an inner place to one further in, instead of clinging to the movement of sight towards the world outside. And immediately, the substance of the universe drew together, redefined, and peopled itself anew. I was aware of a radiance emanating from a place I knew nothing about, a place that might as well have been outside of me as well as within. But the radiance was there, or to put it more precisely, light. It was a fact, for light was there. I felt indescribable relief and happiness so great it almost made me laugh. Confidence and gratitude came as if a prayer had been answered. I found light and joy at the same moment, and I can say without hesitation, from that time on, light and joy have never been separated in my experience. I have had them or lost them together. And and he noticed too that he also spent some time in Auschwitz blind, but he was such a remarkable person. Everyone looked after him, and he survived. He wasn't actually in the. He was in the. Yeah, he was betrayed. He became a member of the French resistance. It's a great story, actually. And he was used to interview people. They'd take people who offered to work for the resistance, often were spies. And they'd take him to meet Jacques, because it was very hard to lie to him because he couldn't see you, and he would just listen. And but eventually somebody knew about him and betrayed him, and he ended up in Auschwitz. But everybody looked after him because he was such a remarkable person. He came out alive, And yeah, and he found, you can tell he had what we call an enlightenment experience with his blindness, where he light and joy. And he said then he learned he had blind sight, and so he could bicycle, and he could sort of tell where the trees were, And he said, but as the minute I got angry or separated from myself, I would lose my sight and run into a tree. He would lose his blind sight. And it was touching that he couldn't, he had to not be self-indulgent, I suppose, would be the way to say it. And he said, he's not quite 8. I've thanked heaven for making me blind while I was still a child, not quite 8 years old. Because he wasn't he was aware that he couldn't see, but he wasn't aware that that was a bad thing. So, and he had great parents who, they lived in Paris, and his father took him to the opera like a couple of times a week, and so he's surrounded by good music and symphonies and operas and things. So that's Jacques Le Seurat, but he noticed that that thing that I think we've all noticed, that if your mind is disturbed and you're holding a grudge, or you're angry, or you feel badly treated or something, you can't see people and you can't experience the life very well. So that was Jacques. And I've been thinking about how, it's really hard to know which horrors to notice in the news, which is the important one. Things succeed each other, and not cancel each other, but in a way like reveal other things that were different from what we expected. And Syria just fell apart, which no one was expecting would be a consequence of other cruelties to the Palestinians and so on. And Syria just fell apart, and so the revelations about the camps, the prisons, the torture prisons in Syria are coming out, and incredible sorrow, and why do people do this? Why do we do this to each other? And that's the deepest darkness, I think. I had a friend who, I'm not sure he's still alive, but I lost touch with him. His refugee life, but he was settled in Canada, and he'd been tortured in Iraq. He'd been arrested in the torture prisons and stuff, and he was a remarkable person, but and kind of optimistic in a way. But he he would scream at night. And I remember sharing, when we were, occasionally he'd teach with us and a group of us, and I would share a room with him because being a Zen person, I didn't mind when he screamed in the middle of the night, But you had to just think, oh, that's just him, and that's all right, and touch him and settle him down, So so he had all these terrible stories, but now these terrible stories are coming out of Syria and not Iraq and so on. So it's just a sad thing that humans do to each other. I asked Alison this morning, what are you doing this morning? What are you doing? She looked She looked fascinated. She said, I'm researching a color. I said, what's your color? What's the color? And she said, Mayan blue. It's an indigo thing, and some guy just found how to make it again. The secret had been lost, and it was in codices. But also, she this charming thing. She said, when people were to be sacrificed, they painted them with this color. And then they cut their living heart out of them, or they threw them into a cenote, a big well. And they found some of the wells were just layers of blue in them. So, I don't know, you don't have to go to the Middle East to get the problem. And so it's a sorrowful thing, and I don't know. The thing to do about the violence in the world, I think in some ways it's like Le Siran, he himself was not violent, and he saw through it in his heart, and I think that's what we have to do ourselves, and that's what we can do, and then the universe will have to take care of the rest, the things we can't take. But we have to negotiate through the darkness, and we can. And here's a way. This is sort of a small example, but this is again from the New York Times, and there's this guy, an Australian guy, is a horse. Calls himself a horse listener, and he's one of those guys who was his father was a rough rider, did rodeos, bull riding and stuff out in New South Wales. It wasn't Western New South Wales, Central New South Wales, a place called Young. It used to be called Lambing Flats, where there was a riot and a massacre, I remember, and they changed the name to Young. So it was now known as Young. But anyway, he was this kid out there on a farm, and he just loved horses and learned to love them, and mainly he did, what's called reining, where you ask the horse to go somewhere, and well, and it does. So he came to the US and he became, well-known and famous rider. And then he got a horse that his wife, horse actually, who just didn't rebel, didn't do anything, but just was depressed. And the horse just didn't respond, didn't come out to see you when you came out and called out to him. And so he thought, he didn't know what to do, but he realized that he'd never really listened to horses enough. He tried to get them to listen to him, and the horse had been generous and kind to him in that way. And I think, anyway, it struck me that I wonder, I don't listen to people enough, So we're all horses, really. so he tried to listen to this horse, and the horse would look somewhere. He's standing in the paddock, somewhere near the horse that didn't seem to spook the horse. So it's some way away, and the horse would turn and look at something, and he'd just turn and look at it. The horse would turn somewhere else, he'd turn. And he'd be walking, and the horse would flick its ear, and he'd stop. And after a while, the horse noticed that he was noticing it. And then the horse became interested in what he was doing. And it was rather marvelous, really. And so he then, pretty much that's it. And people really would just tell the horse what to do, kind of like it was a car. And When he moved a step or two towards the horse, he stopped at a flick of the horse's ear or the shift of his gaze. If he moved back, the horse might sigh or slightly lower his head. If the horse turned to look at chickens in the barnyard, the Schiller, the guy's name was, he turned too. If the horse moved off to graze, the trainer kept pace on a parallel path. And the horse's indications of distress were very subtle and more meaningful than he'd ever understood. And so he realized that the way to communicate the horse was to be full of being, to just really be completely there with the horse, which is sort of rather what Lucien had noticed about he could see, even though he's blind, he could see to some degree if he was really there. And he could see into people's hearts too if he was really there, if he was really listening to them. So how do you, if there's no moon, no light, no stars, how will you get hold of something? Well, we can really be here. And you will notice that, I think you'll notice that your pain is really difficult, but sometimes you just got to be in it. And then if you're in it, I don't know, there's something, you manage to survive it, So it's like that, I suppose. And I suppose emotional pain is worse than physical. I don't know if that's true, really. But they're both kinds of pain. The kind of pain that comes with sorrow and the kind that comes with your body being messed up, like my friend in Iraq. So I think full presence is the best we can do with our lives. And if no one knows why we're here or how long we're going to be here. But if we're fully present, then somehow we're being faithful to what we've been offered. And that seems a wonderful thing. And we can be that in the dark. And that's why the Zen people emphasize the dark so much, because that's where the light is. It's in the dark that we're not carrying our prejudices and preconceptions. And so we start to trust, and we start to, just the way this guy talked to his animals. And as trees seem to change when I'm really present and friendly towards them, and birds do too. Birds definitely do. And like if a bird is panicked and up in the skylight and you talk to it and stop, it'll come down and let you pick it up and take it out. And I think life is full of gateways like that. That's one of the things meditation is. It's sort of entering the joy and the light that's in the dark. Here's Raymond Carver, Rain, which we've had a lot of, and some of you haven't. But and woke up this morning with a terrific urge to lie in bed all day. Woke up this morning with a terrific urge to lie in bed all day and read. Fought against it for a minute, then looked out the window at the rain and gave over. Put myself entirely in the keep of this rainy morning. Would I live my life over again, make the same unforgivable mistakes? Yes, given half a chance, yes. So, that's your complete Raymond Carver. It's kind of wonderful. And that listening to the rain thing is marvelous. It's the complete Zen, just, no, what are you doing today? Nothing. Well, what does that mean? I'm listening to the rain. Here's here are a couple more poems, short poems. This is James Wright. Beginning. The moon drops one or two feathers into the field. The dark wheat listens. Be still, now. There they are, the moon's young, trying their wings. Between trees, a slender woman lifts up the lovely shadow of her face. And now she steps into the air, now she has gone wholly into the air. I stand alone by an elder tree. I do not dare breathe or move. I listen. The wheat leans back towards its own darkness, and I lean towards mine. The more I read James Wright, the stranger poet he seems, which is rather wonderful. And here's another poet who has these big swerves of strangeness. This is Louise Gluck. All Hallows, which is the day after Halloween. It's the 1st of November. I think, is that right? I think that's right. Yes, because Halloween is the evening of All Hallows. Even now this landscape is assembling, the hills darken, the oxen sleep in their blue yoke. The fields having been picked clean, the sheaves bound evenly and piled at the roadside among sunk foil as the toothed moon rises. This is the barrenness of harvest or pestilence. And the wife leaning out the window with her hand extended as in payment, and the seeds, distinct, gold, calling, come here, little one. And the soul creeps out of the tree. It's a wonderful swerve at the end. I don't know. Alison, would you like to talk?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the horse listener, Schiller. And part of the story that you didn't tell, which I found incredibly moving, was, well, that question of how you get hold of something and what's in the way of the listening, of the simply being with wherever I am and whomever I'm with, whether it's a tree or a bird or a person or my own inner life. We listen inward as well as listening outward. And he tells this story of Schiller, how when he's wrestling with this depressed horse, what to do about this horse. And during that period, he was pretty famous, and he would go around and give on lecture tours and talk to people about how to train horses. And he was giving his sort of stump speech at a big conference. And in the middle of the speech, he starts hearing himself saying things he can't believe he's saying. He's telling these old sorrows and troubles from his childhood that he had never spoken even to his wife or his closest friends. And he was just tremendously shaken by this experience. And what I loved about that is that in a way he was the line between who was the horse and the horse's troubles and stories the horse had never told anyone about when he was a young pony and the troubles that he'd had and the heartbreak, that somehow the troubles and the sorrows of the horse became his, and his became the horse's, and you weren't sure exactly where the sorrows had come from. They were simply the sorrows that had not been included in the encounter, both in himself and the horse. And from that point on, then things began to change both for him in his own life and for the horse.
That's great. I'm glad you told that piece, because it's one of the most important pieces, isn't it? Yeah. Tess. I think yes.
Right there.
Right.
Yesterday, I had lunch with a friend I hadn't seen in quite some time, and her father, who's 82, had a stroke recently, and he's a very tough South African sort of guy. And she was saying that one of the interesting effects from the stroke is that he can't stop saying all the things that he's never said to people. And so in this sort of similar way, no matter who he sees, I never like the way that you X, or I've always, these things just keep pouring out of him. And he's not doing it to be mean, because sometimes something will come out and he'll say to someone, oh, sorry, sorry if I'm cranky, or sorry, but he just can't seem to help these truths just pouring out of him. And I could tell the effect even that it just had on his daughter, and that it's having in his whole life. And her whole life, he had said to her, I don't know why you need to bring these things up to people. I just don't bother, kind of thing. And so this is just this outpouring is happening. And I was also thinking, in a number of the things you read, how you said something about how it's so hard when we hear other people or ourselves lying. Like, you can just tell, how Jacques Lucéran could just tell. But what I think is so interesting about that is that I think often we don't necessarily actually even know what's quite true. You just know what's not true, and that venturing into the dark about someplace you've never been before, and how do you get hold of something, feels like the willingness to set down the thing that you're either bullying yourself with, or you wish were true, or all those things that you want to grab hold of, and just give enough space to see, like, what might actually be trying to, what might the horse be trying to say, if we can just listen. And yeah, that's it. The soul climbs out of a tree.
Thank you. The soul climbing out of its tree, yes. Trees are very thoughtful people sometimes. Okay, I don't know. Michelle, do you have anything you want to say?
This is a great koan. I was sitting here thinking about it, and thinking about what it's like to be present, and my experience with it. And one of the things that came up for me is, when I'm really just there and listening, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. And then Allison told that story, and I thought, oh yeah, right, exactly. And I was also thinking about the relationship between these Sunday mornings and sitting here and not knowing, is John going to call on me this week or not? Should I think about what I'm going to say? Should I not? What is it like to actually, can I be present and just see what comes up for me? And then the relationship between that and Doksan, or interviews with teachers, and how, it's so tempting to come with stories and reports, and, come to the meeting with the teacher with a presentation of who you are. And yet, if we ever give instructions for that, it's like, no, you just all you have to do is show up. And if all you have to do is show up for every moment, why be afraid? How can you do it wrong? And I don't know, this feels related. I was talking to my mom yesterday, and we've had a many-year attempt to get her some landline phones. And it's crazy. I don't know why it's been difficult. And I thought, well, why don't we sit down with ChatGPT, and you're going to tell me what you want out of your landline system, and we're going to figure this out, and we're just going to do this. And so, I'm sitting there and asking her, like, well, so what do you want? And she started to get more nervous and more nervous and more nervous. And I'm like, what? I'm just asking what you want out of your phone. And so she was trying to figure out what was going on, and realizing, like, she had this idea that her job was to name a particular phone, but she didn't know what phones were out there. And like realizing that, no, all she had to do is say, like, I want a phone that's easy to set up. I want to be able to see what's on the thing, And it's like, that's not hard. And somehow that relates to this to me. Like, we're grasping for something, but like, what's here and what's closer? And that's always there for us. Thanks.
I might let ChatGPT down too. I might not live up to its expectations. Now I found you. It's George Foy. Do you have anything you want to say? There's only a little bit of time, but wherever you are in the world.
Um, no, I just thank you. I just really love hearing the run of words from you and the stories, and hearing from Todd about his dog, and feeling the darkness. It reminded me of conjunction of horses and darkness when a great blackout hit the Northeast. I was on a horse in an indoor riding school in the middle of New York City, and the lights went out, and there was nothing except shock and trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I wasn't listening to the horse, I have to say, and I don't think the horse was listening to me either. But but it did chime with a time when I was trying very hard to find out what absolute silence was for a research project, and I went into an anechoic chamber, which was the most soundproof place you could possibly imagine. 3 cubes of steel, soundproofed on springs with airtight doors, and I I was hoping to find silence, and what I found was utter lack of sound for human ears and utter lack of light. It was total darkness because electric lights make noise, so there were none in there. And it was a story of failure, because I realized that in total utter silence, my life was making noise. My ears were making noise. My heart and my bloodstream was making noise. And in the total darkness, I was seeing images. I was seeing phosgenes and stars in my eyes, and just visions. And it was utterly peaceful, because I knew there was nothing but void there, and it was also oddly reassuring, because there I was in the midst. Anyway, but thank you all, and thank you.
Thank you, George. Todd, do you have anything you want to say?
Hi, everybody. First, I just want to say thank you to all the people in the Open Temple who were there on Tuesday morning. As many of you probably know, my dog Clark passed away Monday night, and it was this very sudden heart attack, and he just kind of keeled over and just died right in front of us. It really was one of those moments when I just didn't want to be this to be happening, one of those things where you're just like, no, this can't be. What am I supposed to do with this now? And the thing that was really hard initially was, what do I do with his body? I didn't want, it was, I don't know. I just didn't want to have to pick him up and to feel the fact that he was no longer there. It was very hard, and I finally just was able to do it, and I carried him out. Later, we carried him out to the car and took him to his vet, where they had the appropriate services to take care of his body at that hour. And I did that, and just feeling the weight of his body and the looseness of it was so visceral and so just so there and so real. And to do that with my wife, and we were, both of us really struggling and grieving and just feeling the sadness of it. It was very hard. It definitely felt like one of those things that I just didn't, like it was dark, and I just didn't know what to do, But we managed to do it, and we managed to get through the process together. And then having the next day, the morning temple, everybody doing doing kanzeon was really nice. It was really great. So I want to thank you for that. I noticed a couple things over the days after that I think are related to this or interesting. One of the things I noticed was that act of carrying his body was transformed from something that I couldn't imagine doing to something that I can't imagine not doing now. Not doing. It's a very important part of his whole life that we had together with him. I was struck by that. I was struck by the thing that I was most afraid of and most scared of doing become something that that feels like a gift. The other thing I noticed was that process of going through something like this with my wife and the sort of intimacy of it was quite powerful. And the next day or a couple days later, she offered to make me something for lunch or make, I think, a shake. And I didn't really want the shake. I didn't really want the thing that she wanted to make for me. But I just knew that that she was doing it for me, and it was important for her to do it. So I just said, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. And I gave her a hug. So I don't know, I guess that's how you find something to get a hold of. And you just try to be there. And I feel like that's what we tried to do. And it was hard. There's been many times for the last week that I've been very sad. But really, I'm just grateful overall. So, and many of you played a role in that. So thank you for that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. What if there's no moon, no stars, no light? How will you get hold of something then? It's a place you've never been. You don't need to get hold of it. Yunmen's always posing questions like that. You don't need to get hold of something. You're here. The world has hold of us. So just let it have you.